The Mig-29G flies out for Germany in War Thunder. Let's check it out. Germany's history with the MiG-29 traces back to late 1987, when negotiations started between East Germany and the Soviet Union to upgrade the East German Air Force's fighter fleet. A batch of 24 MiG-29As arrived the next year and entered service almost immediately, being a big generational leap over everything else that East Germany had flying. After the German reunification in 1990, most of the former East German Air Force's aircraft were either scrapped or sold off, but the MiG-29s were still basically brand new, and were seen as valuable both as combat aircraft in their own right, but also as aggressors to help train German and NATO pilots to fly against. However, the jets were still set up with the full Soviet kit and needed some conversion work in order to remain in service with Germany. In 1993, a deal was struck for Daimler Chrysler Aerospace to supply NATO-compatible equipment and new cockpit instrumentation along with avionics, with integration assistance directly from the MiG Bureau. The upgrade package swapped out the IFF unit, the radios, navigation equipment, and almost all of the cockpit instrumentation. Contrary to crazy rumors you might read on the internet and doctored photos from 1990s magazines, the upgrade package didn't change the weapons system at all, and the MiG-29G was not able to carry any Western origin missiles or anything like that. Some minor modifications were made on the engines, mostly just for easier maintenance and replacing some parts that were designed to be expendable with a bit more expensive components that would last longer, and while the engine upgrades resulted in some small improvements to fuel efficiency, the output power was basically the same. Germany operated the MiG-29G until the early 2000s when they were transferred to Poland, and a small batch of Polish MiG-29Gs have recently been given to Ukraine and were immediately pressed into combat service. What we get in War Thunder is the MiG-29G, a jet fighter in Rank 8 with a battle rating of 12.3. This jet has a comprehensive weapons system, which includes a full ballistics computer, the EEGS, an infrared search and track with integrated laser rangefinder, helmet-mounted targeting, and the SPO-15 radar warning receiver. The radar warning receiver is, without question, below the standards of most other Rank 8 jets. The radar you get is the N019E. This is an I-band radar that'll be familiar from the MiG-29 before it in the tech tree. It has track-while scan, multiple pulse Doppler modes, and multiple ACM targeting frames. Overall, it's a very capable radar set, even for Rank 8. The loadouts are similar to the earlier MiG-29 and give options for missiles, drop tanks, dumb bombs, and unguided rockets, but no precision air-to-ground ordnance. This is an air superiority fighter, and ground attack is barely even a secondary function. The MiG-29G can carry all four versions of the R-27, the infrared and semi-active radar versions in both the regular and extended range variants. As of November 2023, the R-27ET is the longest range IR missile in the game, and the R-27ER is arguably the best overall performing semi-active radar missile. In short, these are 35G weapons with good range, good tracking, and good speed. The star of the show, however, is, without question, the R-73E. This is an all-aspect infrared missile with 40 Gs of pull, infrared countermeasures, insane off-boresight targeting, and great overall performance. Again, as of November 2023, this is the best dogfight missile in the game, and you can take 6 of them. In terms of flight performance, the MiG-29G is near the top of the AOA dogfight meta, and it's currently the best flying MiG-29 in the game. This jet has an insane thrust-to-weight ratio, excellent turn performance, a good rate of climb, and impressive acceleration even with a missile load. Still, there are a couple of caveats. The first thing you're going to notice, which you already knew if you flew the earlier MiG-29 right before it in the tech tree, is that the engines are thirsty. This is one of the jets where you always want to take a full fuel load and a drop tank every time you fly out. The burn is so rich that you're probably going to be at a good weight for combat by the time you actually get out into the fight. And if you don't max out the fuel, you might run out of gas mid-combat. The good news is that the 29G's engines are slightly more fuel efficient, so you'll get a bit more time out of the same amount of fuel weight. In terms of dogfighting agility, the insane thrust on the engines makes it pretty easy to maintain a good energy state most of the time, and as long as you're not at some insane Mach 1 infinity speed, the overall maneuverability isn't going to let you down. It's got the thrust for vertical maneuvers to work pretty well, and the sustained AOA in order to be competitive in pure rate fights. You're going to get your best dogfighting performance between about 700 and 900 kilometers an hour, so if you can keep it roughly in that range, you're all set. One thing that's important though, like some of the other Rank 8 jets, a fully maxed out ace pilot is almost mandatory. Even with the fully upgraded pilot, you're going to be fighting blackout pretty often, and the 29G is more than happy to let you flip into sustained 12G turns on a whim, so upgrade that pilot. Lastly, no combat flaps, but it doesn't need them. Flying the Mig-29G out in air battles is basically an opportunity to explore the top-tier air battle meta at its fullest. This plane can do BVR missile shots with the R-27ERs, it can do up-close AOA knife fighting with the cannon and the R-73s, it can do one-on-one rate fights, it can do high-speed interception tactics. Really, it can do basically anything except dedicated ground pounding, and I'll get to that shortly. But first, we kind of need to discuss the state of top-tier air battles for a minute. For whatever reason, the Snail is giving us huge matches with like 12 to 16 people on a team, and usually only medium-sized maps. So if you fly off on like the far flank and you burn half your fuel going super wide, you can sometimes find people on their own doing the same thing you were, and get some good classic 1v1 dogfights going, and the Mig-29G is excellent at that, but those situations are going to be the exception. Most of the time, the majority of combat is going to take place in big furballs, with like at least 5 people going at it. Sometimes it's going to be a big 6-on-1 dog pile, sometimes it's going to be a little bit more even, like a 4-on-4, whatever, but group combat is going to be almost unavoidable these days. And it's much more difficult to stay alive because there are missiles flying all over the place. Red and blue. You got new opponents vectoring in on you as you're halfway through a maneuver. It's just complete chaos. Now, the Mig-29G can handle that, and you can use this jet in furball chaos to get some good scores going. But you're going to need to be on absolutely constant alert. The SPO-15 radar warning receiver is a big handicap, and you need to be constantly visually scanning almost non-stop, since you're not going to get the same level of threat indications that most of the other Rank 8 jets have, and your reaction time needs to be very fast on your countermeasures and defensive maneuvers. It's exciting, but it can also be frustrating. Plus, operating the sensors under furball chaos can be a huge workload, so don't feel bad if you struggle with it. Again, the good news though is that the Mig-29G can absolutely perform in that environment really well. The aircraft is not going to hold you back. In terms of ground attack, you can, but don't. It's kind of a waste in this jet after you get done spading it and unlocking all your air-to-air weapons. Maybe taking a multi-role loadout into close air support, but without any LGBs or TV-guided missiles or anything, and with only a very light air-to-ground weapon load to begin with, you're kind of out of your element. And top-tier SPAA is really mean these days, so flying out low for a bomb or rocket pass makes you really vulnerable. My advice? If you must take this out over a ground battle, is just to fly combat air patrol instead of close air support. This is an air superiority fighter. Ground pounding is barely an afterthought. Visually, the Mig-29 in general is a beautiful aircraft, and this one gets some really great paint jobs. I'm especially fond of the demonstration tricolor. That's the one that looks like the big German flag. But really, all of them are pretty nice. This is a great plane to look at on your screen. Landing is easy-ish. You can drop gear at about 700 kilometers an hour and landing flaps at 450 or so, but the brakes aren't very strong, and if you come in hot, you might run out of runway, even with the drag chute. Try to land right at around 300 kilometers an hour if you can help it. The cockpit is kind of a weird mix of East and West. You get most of your instruments with English language and imperial measurements, but the heads-up display is still in Russian. Bitching Betty has replaced Nagging Nadia, so if you have the voice alerts turned on, it'll be in English instead of Russian. To close out on the Mig-29G. This jet has insane maneuverability. It's incredibly fast. It's got some of the best weapons in the game, and it has an infrared search and track with a laser rangefinder. However, the radar warning receiver is obsolete in Rank 8, and it has very limited potential for ground attack. The final verdict on the Mig-29G is that this jet performs very well in the top-tier air battles meta as of late 2023, and it'll probably remain a highly competitive fighter for a very long time. This thing is absolutely worth the grind, and there is no suffering for Germany this time. As always, thanks for watching.